When I was 19 years old, I believed that independence was the ability to hop into my car and go anywhere that I wanted, any time that I wanted. I believed independence was having a part-time job to help me pay my way through university. Looking back now, if I'm honest, I didn't really give much thought to what independence meant to me. I simply took it for granted. Then, on my 20th birthday, my life began to fall apart. I was diagnosed with diabetic retinopathy, which is an eye condition that affects about 55% of people who have been living with diabetes for some time, as I had. What followed was a year of weekly laser surgery, followed by 6 surgical operations, 3 on each eye. Nothing seemed to help. And 3 months after my 21st birthday, I was blind. And suddenly, every shred of independence that I'd had was ripped away from me. Independence is an interesting concept. It has so many different meanings in different people's lives. For some people, it's political independence. For some, it's financial independence. For some, it's lifestyle or personal independence. As I tell my story, I need to be clear that I know how fortunate I am to come from a position where I had all the assets that I needed to help me through what happened to me, financially, attitudinally, and support. And it breaks my heart how often I hear of people who do not have those assets. When I lost my sight, I realized I had a choice. I could go home and give up and be angry and bitter, dependent, depressed. Or I could choose to take back control of my life, to take back my independence, and go out and see what life still had to offer me as a blind woman living in a sighted world. I really hope that I do not need to tell you what decision I made. And so I began the process of learning the techniques that I needed in my new life. I learned Braille, I learned to move around using a white cane, and I learned to use a computer with a screen reader, which is a software application that basically reads aloud to me whatever it is that you can read on the screen. I'm not going to lie and tell you that it was always easy. In reality, I had to learn new ways of doing absolutely everything. Things that I'd been doing for years without even having to think about them. Things like reading, writing, using a computer, using a mobile phone, selecting clothing, applying makeup, pouring a cup of coffee. I even had to learn a new technique of how to apply toothpaste to a toothbrush. And learning some of those skills wasn't easy. Harder was accepting the reality that I had no choice. I had to work through this if I wanted to move forwards with my life. So it was hard, but I persevered. And slowly, bit by bit, I began to reclaim my independence. One of the hardest challenges we face as members of the blind and visually impaired community is how badly people underestimate what we are able to do on our own. Because they don't know the tools and techniques that we have at our disposal, people often think that it's hard. Most often they think it's impossible for us to do something. So they dismiss us. And that has huge implications for our inclusion into society, into communities, and especially our inclusion into the workplace. And much of the work that I do as a disability activist and as a motivational speaker is to teach people about how I do things to help bridge that gap of understanding and increase levels of inclusion. In many ways, independence can be something of a double-edged sword for me. I seem to spend so much time fighting to prove that I am independent, that I can do practically everything that a sighted person can do. And because of that, I find it hard to reach out and ask for help. Let me give you a quick example. A while back, before COVID, I did a presentation for a local chamber of commerce. I was speaking about web accessibility. I was speaking about some of the barriers that persons with disabilities face when trying to gain employment. After that presentation, I left with 50 business cards of people who wanted to find out more about the work that I do and to subscribe to my Beyond Sight blog, which is available on my website, loisstrachan.com. How long do you think it took me to enter those email addresses into my blog management system? How long would it have taken you to do it? If you're someone who's comfortable with technology, you may have an app on your phone that you can take a photograph of a business card and it automatically drops the information into your contacts, from where it's easy to manipulate it and shift it around as you need it. Even if you have to type each of those email addresses out, one letter at a time, it's going to take you what? Maybe 2 minutes per card? That's 100 minutes for 50 business cards. Less than 2 hours. It took me 3 whole days. 3 days where the rest of my work was building up beside me as I sat there and painstakingly opened an app on my phone, took a photograph of the card, waited for the text to be converted into a form that I could read, and oh yes, turned some cards upside down and retake the photograph because I'd got them the wrong way around, and then type them into a spreadsheet. Here's the crazy thing. I could simply have asked my sighted husband to do it for me. Just thinking about it, it is crazy that I sat there for 3 days and struggled through that. It still blows my mind. And yet, maybe you can relate to that story. Because somehow it seems it is hard for us as human beings to reach out and ask for help. Because we believe that it makes us appear to be incapable, unable, or useless. And I'm not just talking about blind people here. It's a pretty universal problem. I know, because I hear it from people all over the world. Here's what I try to do. I try to find a balance. I try to do the things on a daily basis that I can, because I am independent. I try to keep learning and growing my skills, because there are things that I do on a regular basis that it helps me to learn how to do them. So I am growing. But every now and then, there are things that I realize it doesn't make sense for me to struggle through them. And that's when I reach out and ask for help. I also try to be gracious when accepting or when being offered help by friends, family, and colleagues, whether I accept that help or not. I have to tell you, I don't always get it right. There are times that I start on a task that I think is going to be quite simple for me to figure out, and then realize it's a lot more complicated than I thought, and yet decide to struggle through it. There are times that people offer me help and I become frustrated because I think they believe that I can't do that task on my own, when in fact, all they are doing is just trying to be nice. So I don't always get it right, but I'm comfortable that I'm working towards a balance between showing I am independent, showing what I'm capable of doing, and being willing to ask for help. So, what is the message that I'd like to leave you with today? Well, ideally, I'd like for you to leave here with an understanding that someone who is blind or visually impaired can almost certainly do more than you believe is possible. To be open-minded about it and to give them the opportunity to show you what they can do independently. That would be a big win for me. But beyond that, I'd like to leave you with a few thoughts about independence, things that I have come to realize through the years since I was that 21-year-old who had just lost her sight. That independence should never be taken for granted, that it is a priceless gift that should always be valued. That if you're not comfortable with your levels of independence in any aspect of your life, that you need to work out what you can do to shift your independence and then to take action, because nobody's going to be able to do that for you. You have to do it yourself, even if you only manage to change one step at a time. And finally, to be comfortable in knowing that it is okay to ask for help sometimes. That sometimes it makes sense to let someone else do a task rather than expending your own time, your own energy, and frankly, becoming frustrated because you insist on doing it yourself. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity of speaking to you today. It's been such a privilege to be part of the Herstory Summit. If you'd like to find out more about me, you can hop onto my website at loisstrachan.com. And if you have questions, stay on the line and we have a speaker Q&A after the end of this session. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of the session.